All right. So today we're talking about unlocking the door to comprehensive financial planning. And as I said just now, if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat. And but before we start, we'd like to briefly introduce Money Hour, because I do not think that I presume that every one of you know about who we are and why we are talking to you today. As brother here has very kindly introduced, Money Hour is a financial advisor, but we are also an NTUC social enterprise. We are the youngest NTUC social enterprise, along with the names that you know, like NTUC FairPrice, NTUC First Campus, and so on. And our mission is to empower every person and every family in Singapore to live a fulfilling life through great financial advice. Unlike other financial advisors, there's so many financial advisors out there, insurance agents, independent financial advisors. What we want to bring is quite a unique combination to you. We are all of three things, not just one or two of these, but all three. Firstly, our services are comprehensive because we don't just talk about investments, we don't just talk about insurance, we also talk about CPF and budgeting and all the whole ambit of financial planning that you need to know. Secondly, we have fully salaried advisors. Our advisors do not receive commissions from what they sell. So you know that if they implement or ask you to implement any solutions, it will be truly in your best interest. And thirdly, we are not tied to any insurer. We are not tied to NTUC Income. We are a sister company of NTUC Income, but we do not exclusively or in any way give any preference to NTUC Income. And we are not tied to a bank, and we are also not a venture capitalist funded. So don't worry, I'm not here to basically buy a good class bungalow after earning a lot of money and IPOing this company. No, we are employees of a social enterprise. And we are also a bionic financial advisor, as has been mentioned. And bionic means that we use technology to make planning accessible and simple for everyone. But from humans, we have a full-fledged salary advisor team and also a solutions team. And we try to keep this low cost in delivering our advice. So that is who we are and why we are interested really in talking to everyone about financial planning, because we believe it can really make a difference to your lives. So what exactly are we going to talk about today? Firstly, is to understand what does financial planning mean, what it is not, and what it is, and this term called financial wellness. How do we plan comprehensively is the next big topic. I'll introduce a framework of planning that we call the personal money equation, and I'll give you about 4 steps in financial planning. And of this, the one step is on investments. And here we talk about why do we invest? Isn't it very risky or scary? What should we invest in? How to invest, and investing in different life stages, whether you are accumulating or you are in retirement. This is something that is very important to know. Okay, so then we'll also have a Q&A session for those who have at the end when the questions are not answered by Albert. So let's jump straight in here. First, let's talk about what financial planning is not. So when we talk about financial planning, nobody actually wakes up and says, today I'm going to do financial planning, because you're going to ask me to buy something and you're going to ask me to deprive myself today and live a very terrible life. And in order that in future, I'm going to have something for retirement. No, this is not about deprivation today for the sake of retirement, because as we always say, you may not get there. None of us has a contract with God to know when we are actually going to go upstairs. Financial planning is also not about buying insurance products, not about buying investment products. It's not the right place to start, because if you are ever doing renovations or buying a new house, right, you might actually go around collecting, wow, this one very nice, that one is very nice. And what if it doesn't fit you? Because it might look very nice in the showroom, but it might not fit you, and then you will actually be in quite a bit of trouble. But then how do we want to do financial planning? Actually, why do we want to do financial planning if it's not about depriving ourselves today for tomorrow, and if it's not about just collecting the correct kind of products? Well, financial planning ultimately is about financial wellness. And wellness as a term connotes is personal. It is holistic, and it is lifelong. And indeed, money runs through every aspect of our life. And where we want to do is, how we want to use money, so we use money as an enabler so that we have sufficient and reliable means to live meaningfully, both now and into the future, and to be confident of achieving this no matter what happens. So here the emphasis is on sufficiency, reliability, meaning, balance now and the future, and peace of mind. And how do we then want to do planning if it's not by collecting products and not just by focusing on depriving ourselves today? Well, I would suggest that we need to plan comprehensively, in the same way that we don't want to buy something for our house that doesn't fit. We want to also make sure that we take measurements for ourselves. In the context of financial planning, it is like, where are we? What do we need? What is our budget? How do we balance between the different needs that we have? Are we financially healthy? And just as in a house, you have different rooms. When you buy a house, when you build a house, when you renovate a house, you don't want to have a beautiful bathroom and then a leaking bedroom. So this is where we have the what you want is actually to balance the multifaceted needs, because we all have limited dollars, and you have protection needs, your kids' education needs, you have so many other needs, but you only have so limited resources. So how do we balance this all out? And only a comprehensive plan that looks at holistically can show you that. Thirdly, there are different needs in different seasons of your life. Just as talking about house, right? 20 years ago, I bought a 4-room HDB flat in Whampoa, not very near Jurong, right? Then, but at that time, I knocked down 1 room, so I have 2 bedrooms left because it's just me and my husband. We were in our early 20s. Then, many years later, our son came. Then it's like, oh, okay, no place and all that. So your plan has to evolve with you according to your season of life, just as your needs change in a house, for example. So how do you plan to be flexible enough to cater for all the different seasons of life? And finally, I think that only a comprehensive plan that does not talk about products or that can recommend very powerful solutions to you that are in your control and which has nothing to do with money. Nothing to do with having you put your money into a product that gives an advisor a commission or a revenue. So this includes things like budgeting, which is under your control, and it includes things like CPF, which is a national scheme that is quote unquote free. So how then do we do comprehensive planning? But some of you here, I'm not sure how old or how young you are, what situation are you in. You might have this thing, okay, but ultimately you're talking about people who are very rich, but maybe I'm very young, I don't earn very much anyway. Here is where I want to tell you that financial planning is for you, because your time and the compounding power of time is one of the best assets that you can have. And your time is money, so it is never too young to think about planning. Or maybe you're already retired or retiring already. You think, oh, and I left it too late. It's too. I can't do this anymore. Doesn't mean anything. I'm just I made a mistake. I'm too late. I'd like to tell you that you have more time than you think. The retirement age is 62 today. It might be 65, but the end of life expectancy for Singaporeans is about maybe 85 or more. And here is where we have that time horizon, even to do something like investments, even to take risks. We should not just be thinking about putting everything into fixed deposits when it comes to the time you retire. So you might have more time to think, but maybe you don't have much surplus left every month. Now, here is where I tell you that you might have good news, that financial planning might not need to mean buying products, at least not the way that Money Hour recommends. So let's just get straight into it on the steps of financial planning. So I want to say that we have a framework for financial planning, and then the 4 steps, or plus all 5 steps here, will be firstly, checking your financial health. Secondly, protecting your plan at the lowest cost. Thirdly, national schemes, understanding them, especially CPF for retirement. And fourthly, investing, and how you invest to get rich slowly but more surely. And finally, I'll recommend very quickly for you how you can do a will, so that when you leave this world, you don't leave a mess, but you leave to bless your family. What is this personal money equation that forms the framework? I think it's very important for each of us to understand this personal money equation, because that should frame how we look at our finances in general. Each of us has a personal money equation that looks like this. There's a left side and there's a right side. The left side is what happens to us especially income earners. We have an income every month. We have fixed expenses like your mortgage, like your taxes and so. And then we have variable expenses, for example, going out to eat when COVID allows, like, going on holidays, again, maybe happening soon, hasn't happened much in the last 2 years. And then at the end of the month, we have a surplus, hopefully a positive one. Then we put this surplus to work in some investments or in the bank, and this gives us a certain return compounded over a number of years towards a future goal. So now I want to ask a quick question, and I want to encourage you to type in the chat the left side versus the right side. Which side is the side that you think makes you rich? So just by type, maybe you can type L in the chat, or R if you think it's the right side. If you think it's the left side, could you type L? So thank you, Nimhan, Jaya. Wow, everybody saying right side. No left-handers here. Casey says it's the left side. Yeah. I'd like to suggest to you that I think many financial advisors, investment managers say you must do the right side, and we're not saying you don't do the right side. I'd like to suggest to you that what the left side really is your short-term financial planning. Okay, let me try to see whether I can. Okay, and it is what helps you become rich, in our opinion, because this is our most important asset, is actually our income, and specifically that the surplus that it can generate. So short-term financial planning helps you become rich, and is something you can better control. For most of us, it's like that, because we don't start with huge assets unless you have inherited very, very huge assets. The right side is actually a long-term investment strategy, and a long-term investment strategy has something to do with being rich. It helps you to stay rich, and this is what the side that we cannot control, because we can't control markets well. So when you look at the money equation, then what do we want to do with it in financial planning? Firstly, we look at the left side in terms of income. We want to protect this income. We want to increase this income. And this is by doing things like being the best in what you do. So this morning, I was actually at the NTUC Ordinary Delegates Conference when they launched a learning platform by Learning Hub. And this is because we want to encourage all workers, all employees to upskill themselves so you can increase your work prospects, increase your income, and have more stability in earning an income. So being the best in what you do, staying relevant, is very, very important to financial planning, because it's actually about life planning. And at the same time, you want to protect your income using suitable and low-cost insurance, which I'll talk about later. Secondly, in terms of saving and expenses, what we want to do then is to always increase our savings by controlling our expenses through budgeting, right? So you have to do things like, my computer was going to spoil, right? We have to have some kind of buffers for such things, but we don't always have to have the latest or that, because we want to live within our means. We want to lower our debt, and we want to have an emergency fund in case something happens or we lose our job. And this part on the savings and surplus, I put it after expenses. Is there a way that we can move this up such that we pay ourselves first with our income? Every month we save, invest first, and then we spend what's left. So this is financial planning. And as you can see, I didn't talk very much about products except for low-cost insurance. Right side, also very important. Right side is your long-term investment strategy. You accumulate through CPF and also invest in markets over the long term. Stay invested to get the returns you need. Now that you understand this personal money equation, you can take a screenshot, a snapshot, and this is where then everything else that I tell you do relate back to these two sides of the equation. Step one, financial health comes first. The left side is actually a snapshot from our comprehensive financial plan report in Money Hour. But if a financial advisor tells you to buy this or buy that without checking your some of these financial health matters with you, then it's a bit like asking you to build a house without checking your foundations. And these things include things like your emergency fund. Do you have an emergency fund? We recommend about 6 months. What is your debt servicing ratio? What is your savings ratio? So you must be in good health before you can run a marathon. Just as if you run a marathon, you better your heart is healthy. Check your financial health. So the first thing is you must be financial healthy in the basics of the left side of your financial equation, so you can run the marathon. The second step is protecting your plan, protecting your accumulation plan or your retirement income plan at the lowest cost. So Money Hours insurance philosophy is this: buy as much insurance as you need and pay as little as you can. Sometimes I hear people say that Singaporeans are overinsured. Actually, Singaporeans are not overinsured. They're just overpaying for insurance because their coverage might actually be very low. So the role of insurance is protection. And we want to emphasize that, because if you understand that, you'll never buy insurance the same way again. Insurance itself is not very good for saving, especially for long-term saving in endowments and so on. It's not that it's bad in itself, but the costs are high, the returns are low, and the flexibility is also low. I think all of us has an insurance plan that we bought at some point that we sort of regret buying. Right, so that is one of the issues here in the insurance industry, because sometimes there's more need to sell than there's a need to buy. But what you need to do then is to use this low-cost term insurance, because most of the time, most of our needs are not for a whole life. And most importantly, the most important thing why we advocate term insurance at Money Hour, because it's low cost, is because whole life is just too expensive to cover your needs fully. So on the next slide, I will try to explain to you why we see that. Now this is a timeline, and currently you might be here now, for those of you who are not yet retired, and you have certain degree of assets, cash, CPF, and other assets. And you want to build these assets towards a future larger asset for the time you want to slow down or be retire or have financial independence. Now, as long as you have an income and you earn, you can save from that income, which is again your most important financial assets, this plan is great, because you can fund your expenses out of your income and still have a surplus to build and grow towards your current assets, towards your future assets. However, there are some risks that can cause your income to stop. And what are these risks? Death, when your income will stop for your dependents who depend on this income. Occupational disability, this is the inability to perform a job. For example, if you are a teacher and you lose your voice because of injury or accident. In some cases, depression. And you lose your ability to work or to work at that same level of income for a while. And thirdly, critical illness. Critical illness like cancer, having a heart attack, can cause you to have to stop work to recuperate for a number of years, assuming that you do survive that critical illness onset. So then this plan, your plan will fail, because you will have to draw, you have no more income, so you have to draw on your current assets to fund your expenses. And this is a life risk. And what you need to do then in insurance, the role of insurance, is to replace the income to yourself or your loved ones as a result of these life risks happening to you. But what about after retirement? Can you die? Can you get disabled? And can you contract cancer? Of course you can. But after retirement, there's actually no more income to replace. And therefore, in this period after your planned retirement, income replacement insurance is not needed. What's the other big risk that can affect this plan? It is actually a depleting of your current assets by big bills like hospital bills and so on. Here, it can also happen after retirement, because there are big expenses for going to hospital. In fact, maybe even more. And so you find that medical expenses are needed both before retirement and after retirement. So if you look at it this way, in terms of the role of insurance and what you are actually using insurance for, you'll find two things. Firstly, that income replacement is a temporary need. It is a need that you have until your retirement age or until you have no more dependents, whichever is later. It is a need for a term of time, which is that's why we use term insurance to cover these risks of death, disability, and critical illness. But when it comes to lifelong needs, like medical expenses, then you need it as long as you live. So for example, a shield plan up to what you want in terms of your healthcare coverage. The step 3 then, so you talk about your health, you are good to run the journey, you talk about you have protected your plan against a life risk. Then what constitutes the accumulation plan, and in particular looking for retirement? I think here it's very important that as you build your financial house, you understand that the floor of all this is your national schemes. In particular, I'm going to talk about CPF. Now, that when we talk about retirement, there's actually 3 must-haves. People talk about retirement, tend to think, I need a sum of money and I'm stressed about this sum of money. But actually, there are 3 must-haves, and CPF has a role in all 3. What's the first one? Actually, a roof over your head. So we say the first must-have in retirement is a fully paid house. And that's why we recommend that you buy a house that's good for your needs, but that you can pay off by the time you retire. And here, as we know, we can use for down payment and part of our installments, and on top of that, you use cash. The second I talked about already, medical insurance. If you're comfortable with B2 and C wards and the government hospitals and the say associated chronic care for dialysis or that at public institutions, then the MediShield Life for Singaporeans and PRs will suffice for that. So please tell all your relatives and all that, in case something happens to you, and send you to the hospital. Please send you to government hospital and put you in a B2 or C class ward if you don't have any other insurance. The private insurance is again a second layer or on top of that, and that is for government wards and private hospitals. The third is an income stream that you want to have for your retirement years. And here again, there are 2 layers. The safe retirement income floor is also what we say provides your die must have income for your basic needs. And this can be provided in particular by CPF, and especially CPF Life, which is your annuity. And annuity is something that gives you a sum of money that pays for as long as you live from your CPF retirement account. Now, if you need more than that, then this is where other investments come in to be a supplementary stream of income on top of that die must have income for lifestyle needs. So this is the 3 must-have in retirement. And I really want to talk a bit more about CPF because at Money Hour we are quite passionate about this. And you know, sometimes people say, don't like government and all that. And we always say, you don't have to like the government. Right? You just have to like the government's money that they give you. So here is where we want to explain to you about CPF. And again, it's something that only a fee-based advisor would actually really want to talk to you about it, because CPF doesn't pay anyone commission, right? Now, CPF is a safe retirement income floor. Now, let's put numbers to this. When you turn 55, your special account, ordinary account, goes into a retirement account on the night or day, I think midnight or something, when you turn 55. And for every cohort that turns 55, there will be a retirement sum. So for this year, if you've turned 55, your retirement sum, the full retirement sum is 186,000. Your basic is half of this, and your enhanced is 1.5 times of this. Now, every year this goes up by about 3% to cater for inflation and lifestyle increase. So if you have this amount at 55, then from age 65 onwards, 10 years later, you will get a monthly payout of about $800 from 65 years old until you go upstairs. If you're the full, then you get about $1,500 per month from 65 years onwards until you go upstairs. If you have the enhanced, then it's about 2,000 a month. So look at this table. So of course, you're in between, there'll be in between. So these are the estimates that are currently good for this cohort. If you look at this table, what does this mean? Look at the monthly income that you can get from CPF. This means that if you're a retired couple and both of you, each of you has the full retirement sum, you can actually get an income of 3,000 per month per household for life from age 65. If you have the enhanced retirement sum, it's 4,000 per month per household for life. So here's what I want to say, that actually it's not bad, right? It's not bad for relative to about median incomes. And bear in mind, again, you have three must-haves. You are no longer paying your house, and there are a lot of expenses that used to be in when you're working years, when you spend a lot, that you may not have anymore. For example, relating to children. And I want to give you an example of one of our clients. We call her Nancy. She actually earns 1,500. She's 42 years old. She's single, and she is a supermarket cashier. Now, she came to us for our planning service, and I found that actually she doesn't need to buy anything for retirement. This is actually her report, and you see that we projected that she will actually have a CPF Life monthly payout 23 years later of $2,000. Now, this is equivalent to 1,003 in today's dollars. So you match that against her current earnings as a cashier. Actually, not bad, right? In today's dollars. So if she retired, when she retires, she can actually continue her lifestyle. And I thought that for Nancy, there are other areas where she actually needed to save, and she could rent out a room in her flat that she inherited from her father, and so on. So sometimes national schemes can provide a very good base, and even for some people, it's really financial planning without products. And this is what I was talking about. It may not always involve you having to buy products, but you should understand how good some of these national schemes are. And at Money Hour, we built a proprietary CPF analyzer that incorporates all your changing contributions, your inflows, outflows for mortgage. CPF is quite complicated. There's so many rules and all that. So we coded all that into analyzer, and this is how we came up in this case in Nancy's CPF. Now, so I want to make a statement here that when Money Hour first came, right, we launched and we said, oh, we are incorporating CPF into planning. We got so much flack from the industry. I said, but we also do that. But we realized that a lot of times what advisors are saying is that they either do very cursory projection of CPF, if at all, or they will tell you CPF not good, and they ask you to take out your CPF to invest it. Even robo-advisors will ask you to do that. Now, this is, of course, I'm not saying this is bad, but investing CPF is only a sideshow. When it comes to CPF, it's really what I talked about just now, the three must-haves, CPF Life. In fact, CPF Life as an annuity is such a good annuity because that it killed so many annuities in the market, because no one can beat that rate. And we don't have time now, but CPF actually accumulates in your special account at least 4%. For some part of the balances, you can even get 5%. The same with retirement account. And this is risk-free in the sense that unless the Singapore government collapses, you will get it that you don't have to put this money at risk. Of course, the rate might be at risk because there's always policy risk, but I think that we know that is a government is not going to do anything that is very drastic, especially nowadays in the environment. So there is the policy risk, yes, but in terms of credit risk, market risk, no. So be careful about investing CPF. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Some of you can invest your ordinary account. Don't invest your special account. 4% just not worth it, taking it out. But weigh it against also your left side. It can be a buffer for paying your mortgage, for example. And secondly, we are also not, while we love CPF, we are not a government mouthpiece. Not everyone should top up the CPF. If you are young, you're thinking of maybe buying a house, doing something with your money, then you going CPF is a one-way street. Your money is not in. So that's about comprehensive planning is all about that, incorporating the schemes in the right way. Okay, the step 4, investments. So here is where we think that investing is about the right side, right? But we say get rich slowly. Why you say get rich slowly? Because get rich slowly is the sure way to stay rich. Right? So, and I want to go through now a little bit more about investing than I had done with the first 3 steps. But why invest? Isn't investing risky? What should we invest in, and how to invest, and how do you invest in different life stages? Now, why do we invest? Now, investing, as you've probably heard, is making your money work harder for you. The longer time you have, you can go harness this power of compound return. So some people say it's like a 8th wonder of the world. When you invest, your wealth does not increase linearly. So here, if you every year get 5%, okay. So I say upfront, it's not every year you get 5%. Sometimes you might get 20, sometimes you get -10 and all that, right? So that is about the risk of investing. But on average, this is how wealth increases, right? So at 20,000, it doesn't increase 1,000 every year on average. It increases in bigger and bigger and bigger steps. So making your money work harder for you is part of the answer why we invest. But let's say you don't care about, I say I'm not a money-minded person, I should think I just very simple, all that. Then while that compounding power doesn't just work for you, it can work against you. Cost of living compound also. It's called inflation. And I think a lot of us have that, have heard that inflation in the US is higher, and can expect inflation in Singapore maybe to be high, at least for the short term. But whatever happens, what we know that one day we also will no longer earn, but we still spend as long as we live. So from that perspective, investing carries risk, but not investing is risky, and arguably riskier, because inflation is almost certain, and the fact that one day you no longer earn is also certain. So in this example here, if you then take no investment risk and accumulate only in a bank for 30 years, you will get only 387,000, and by the expenses of 3,000 a month throughout 30 years of retirement can be much higher. And this is also why you need to plan, why you need to invest. Now, what can we invest in then? You say, okay, you should invest. I just want to very quickly go through this, because we invest in assets. Okay, rich people buy assets, poor and middle class people buy liabilities. So asset is something that can produce you cash that you can consume in the future. So your car is not an asset. Your residential home, well, it can be an asset, but only at the time when you sell it or you rent it or you monetize it. But here are the different types of asset classes. Stocks, also called equities, bonds, cash, commodities, private equity, and others, you have crypto and all that as well nowadays. So what is an asset class? You hear this term asset class. The asset class is like a food group. You have carbohydrates, you have proteins, you have fats and all that. And each food group has its role. It has its own nutritional mix. It gives you energy, it gives you growth power, healing power, and all that. So similarly, each asset class has its own nutritional mix, its own role in terms of, say, return and risk profile. Then we talk about asset allocation in a portfolio. A portfolio is when you collect different assets, and the proportion you allocate to stocks, bonds, and so on is called your asset allocation. 60% stocks, 40% bonds is considered a balanced fund, for example. So it's the same way. You have a plate and you allocate how much to protein, how much to vegetables, and how much to say rice and all that. Right? So then when you talk about ETFs and unit trusts, these are not assets classes themselves. They are just the container in which you put your assets, like the bento box or like your food wrapper. Okay, and we also talk about indexes. S&P index is a representative of the US markets, the 500 biggest stock. STI, Singapore FTSE Straits Times Index, represents the Singapore market, and in that case, only 30 stocks for our market. So these are just a kind of quick primer I have. But what can you invest in? There are these different asset classes. Now, very quickly, but what should you invest in about of these asset classes? Each asset class has a role, and these are the roles I'll flash very quickly. Stocks is a core returns generator. It is the core asset that generates returns in a reliable manner. Bonds are there. You don't really make money from bonds in a sense. You make money, bonds are a stabilizer for a portfolio. Cash is there for you to keep as safe as possible in an emergency fund. Now, real estate that you don't stay in is a second income generator, but it's somewhat optional, because most of us, the outlay is very high. And it's very chunky risk. It locks up your money, and it's illiquid. Illiquid means not easy to sell. There's a whole bunch of alternatives, be it private equity, commodities, gold, and wine and art and all that. Now, for most individuals, it is really not very necessary in our opinion. It's high risk, it's illiquid, it's only speculative return. Speculative means there's no economic behind it for most of asset management for private equity. But there's usually there's a certain speculative risk about this. Gold doesn't produce anything on its own, for example. You need a certain view of it. And finally, for crypto, I would say it's experimental. It's probably the only new asset class for the longest time that we've had. So here is where it is a different asset class. And what should you invest in? Money Owl, we would recommend that your core, your portfolio, the core of what you do is on your staples, the things you put in your food, your assets is based on the core generator of returns, mainly some equities and stocks, and then you use bonds to stabilize. Now, why is this so? Because when you buy stocks, you're actually buying a share of a company that is operating in the economy that has earnings. When you buy bonds, you are actually lending money to companies or to countries. And so here is where we feel that this is where, based on the real economy, we should put these. We are basically investing in world growth, investing in globally in all the companies and the human enterprise of the market economy. And you talk about inflation. Indeed, stocks and bonds have rewarded long-term investors over time. Each of them has their return characteristics, and here is what we see for $1 in all these cases. In the US context, it has beaten inflation over the long term. And I want to talk a bit about stock markets because I feel like it's risky, and I said that you're not investing is risky, but what about investing part also, right? So it's risky because we always hear there's this crisis here. No, there's always a crisis somehow in the market. There's always something happening that causes everyone to freak out, and that's how news sells itself, and that's how news channels sell themselves. But you see that no matter what crisis the market goes through, it always recovers and it goes up in the long run. The stock market always recovers and goes up in the long run, and you need to look beyond the news and concerns of the day to the long-term growth potential. So we'll talk about why you need to invest, which is that it's risky actually not to invest. You talk about what invest in the global economy through stocks and bonds in the capital markets to beat inflation. And finally, there's how to invest. Here is where we want to recommend to you our Money Hour philosophy, which is a simple philosophy that you can stick with through all seasons of the markets and even through your different life stages. First, keep costs low. Secondly, keep it simple. Don't take active bets. And I will go into that. This is about diversification and not market timing. And then lastly, stay invested so that whatever happens, you can reap the market return. And here is where I want to illustrate very quickly how doing some of these things wrongly actually eats away from returns. MSCI World is index of the developed global markets, and they generate over the past maybe long term, 10, 15 years or so, have generated about 9% per annum return. The fund expenses, total expense ratios, part of this is to do with fund management costs, part of it is given as trailer commissions to advisors. Like Money Hour, we don't use those funds, but we have funds that don't pay us any commissions. But this can be as high as 2% here. And then, but that's not all about keeping expenses low. It is also that the manager, the fund manager actions are trying to beat the market either through timing or some stock selection over the long run has not actually borne fruit for this traditional active management, and this actually takes away yet more return. So we do encourage you, please keep your costs low and avoid active management. Now the second part of what is active management? Active management generally consists of two main ways. One is go and pick the better performing of stocks or bonds or the sectors or countries that might outperform, because it's so obvious, right? Well, once upon a time, it might seem so for some, and then it doesn't work. So on the left, you have General Electric, darling of every management guru and all that. But look at where it is today, and it did not recover. Now, you know that General Electric is being split up now, right? Because of this underperformance. What about Creative nearer to home? Now, if you bought Creative here, I think that you'll be very sad because we are still stuck there. Because this always recovers and goes out in the long run, applies to broad general global markets or globalized markets. At least it must be like at least like S&P 500 or so, where you're exposed to the global economy. It doesn't apply to individual stocks. If an individual stock, something happens to it, then there is no hope of recovery. So this is a very important diversification about controlling your risk. But diversifying is not just a safer way, it's also a better way, because you don't have to pick the winners. Now, we say that during the COVID situation, wow, you know, the world economy was bad. But, you know, you're watching this webinar on, was it a Mac or a PC? Did you order Mac delivery? Or did you watch Netflix? Did you watch Korean drama? You buy toilet paper? So all this, in every situation, there will be winners in the economy. And we can't tell in advance sometimes because markets move very efficiently. But when you own the market, you always own the winners of the day. And here you see that if, in fact, having this kind of level of, without having to do all this trying to pick and all that, you actually do better than if you miss out. Of course, if you pick the right things, you will make more than the market, but it's very hard to do this consistently year after year into the long term. So what about market timing? Market timing, theoretically, you buy at the low, sell at the high, right? And that is on hindsight. But most of the time, this is what happens. You buy because, oh, you're motivated by greed, and then it ends up that you buy near the highs and then you sell at low. And then if you repeat this again, that's when people get burnt by stock market. So I want to show you that if there's a lot of talks that markets are so high, and every year in, year out for the last 10 years, you've heard this, if not more. And if you want to try to move in and out, if you time it wrongly, just a few days, okay, this is a long period of 30 years, and we are talking not about missing a few weeks, you know, we're talking about missing just the 25 best single days. Instead of, if you stay invested, you earn over 21,000 from the US market, you will earn only 4,000, right? Even if you miss just one day, you miss 5 days, and it can hurt you very much. So sometimes trying too much actually can hurt your portfolio and bring even more risk to your plan than if you did nothing in that sense. So the good news I want to tell you is there is no need to time the market, and I'll show you the evidence and then explain the logic very quickly. So how do we why is there no need to time market? Because you can actually get sufficient return if you just stay invest or invest regularly out of your surplus. You will get the average return and it's less stressful. But there are two conditions. One condition is you must have time. So we like to recommend at least 10 years, preferably 15 years for 100% equities portfolio. If you don't have time, add some bonds. I'll explain why. And secondly, again, I'm repeating here, invest in broad markets. Don't invest in one stock, 2 stocks. Don't even invest in 30 stocks in the STI. Invest in thousands of stocks across the globe in different countries, different sectors, different companies. So you don't take any of the specific risks. And I said I'll show you some evidence. And here it is. Okay, here is a chart of the annualized returns of the US stock market represented by the S&P index for about 100 years. So, and this is how you read the chart. Each box here represents the annualized return or the average per year return from the beginning of the year represented at the top of the column until the end of the year at the start of the row. So this means that in 1928, for that 1 year, from the beginning of 1928 to the end of 1928, if you were invested in the stock market, you will have made a whopping 43.6% return. If you stay invested for 1 more year, your per year compounded return would have dropped to 14.7%. This is not 2-year return. This is annualized return, so it's 14.7 2 times over. But if you 2 years old return, is actually 31.6%. So it's dropped, but you're still okay because it's still positive. Now, what happened then is actually the Great Depression. Now, it went on. So if you, in 4 years, you actually have lost your capital, and for your annualized return is 13.5% negative, or about a 44% loss. So this is how you read this chart. Now let's come a bit closer to our time during the global financial crisis. Now in 2008, if you were invested in the market from January to the end, you would have lost 37% of what you invested at the beginning of the year. But in 2 years, you will have moderated your loss to 10.7% annualized, or totally your loss has moderated or narrowed to total loss of about negative 20% only. 3 years is negative 8.5%, or negative 2.9% 3 times over. But by the 5th year, you will have made back all the money that you lost and already, just in 5 years. So this is how you read the chart, and then we put them all together into one big diagram. And those that in the years when you have a positive annualized return, we shade green, and you have a negative annualized return, you shade pink or red. The darker the color, the more positive or more negative. So what is the first thing that we notice here? So if you are live in the audience here, most people would tell me, hey, most of it is green. And that's great, right? And that's really encouraging, because it says that most of the time investors are actually making money. And what's the second thing that you notice here is that where you have clumps of, when you have the very big, that means a very big losses, negative losses, double-digit losses, they are along the edge of the triangle. And this is where you see that it doesn't happen every year, right? It doesn't happen all the time. It happens in the Great Depression. It happened in the 1970s. Some people call it the I crisis, and then you had .com, and then the global financial crisis. And I think over here you saw a little bit here as well. Okay, so that is the second thing that you notice. Now, what's the other thing that is interesting about this is that if you count the number of boxes from the time when you have a red, where it's very negative, or pink, and you count until there is no more pink or red box, and then you look, and then you draw this parallel line, then you notice something, that after 15 boxes, the worst time was the Great Depression. After 15 boxes, you are in green territory. This is your safe zone. This means that if you could stay invested during the last 100 years, it didn't matter whether you started in 1928 or 1929 or 2000 or whatever, as long as you have 15 years, you will not lose capital. You will reach the safe zone. So this is a beautiful chart, and I encourage you to take a picture of it. And so that when you're invested in the stock market, you take it out, and yes, in stock market is volatile, take it out and encourage yourself, oh, okay, it's green. Right? So you must have that time. Now, if you exclude the Great Depression, then it is actually narrowed to 10 years to reach the safe zone. Now, we're not saying that 10 years is a magic number, or even 15 years, whatever, but it gives us a good handle. We understand that time is what helps us to ride out the volatility. And that is the evidence. Now, what is the logic? Why is it stock markets always recover and go up in the long run? I mentioned already, you are investing in human enterprise, you're investing on that. Because what really drives stock prices? Stock prices are driven by earnings of the companies, ultimately in the long run. Of course, there's sentiment, but in the long run, it's driven by earnings. And what drives earnings? Demand drives earning. And what fundamentally drives demand, if you add up all the demand of all the listed companies shares in the services and products in the world, it is actually global population growth and increase in living standards, because that is what humans seek. They seek increase in their life standards. So this is the logic that supports why stocks go up in the long run, and we have seen it play out in the last 100 years. So I hope that this gives you some good sense of what, when you talk about investing in markets, that when you understand markets, you're not going to be so scared anymore. But some of you might say, hey, but I cannot take it now. I see one day, last year, COVID, right? It went down by 20-something%. Now, for Money Hour, we got very excited. We actually have a plan, and we call our clients and say, you've got dry powder, maybe you can deploy a bit, gives your plan a boost. And we are very confident that because we understand how market works. But I said not everyone can do it. Now, if you're on a roller coaster, now imagine you're on a roller coaster, and you go to Battersea Galactica at Universal Studios, and wow, and you want to go on it, right? What if every roller coaster had a button and you can press when you get scared? Don't have, right? No such thing, right? You will actually, in your head that you are strapped in, the centrifugal force and all that will be all right for you. But if you press that button, you will fall to your death if you stop the roller coaster when doing the worst rides. So this is why there's no such thing as a roller coaster. But the stock market is like a roller coaster with a press button. And many investors have fallen to their quote-unquote death because they pressed the button and they sold at the wrong time. So what is then the prescription for this? Because since we cannot take away that stop button from the stock market, is to choose the right roller coaster. Choose the Shrek one. Don't choose the Battlestar Galactica one. And how do you do that? In a portfolio, you add bonds. So you choose the right portfolio for your need to take risks. If you don't need to have that return, you don't need to have such a risky portfolio, so much equities. If you're unwilling, then because you don't have the appetite, then add some bonds, because they help to dampen the volatility. You see here, the green lines or turquoise lines are where you have the highest returns over time, because 100% equities portfolio. But the drawdown is also the largest, because that is the volatility that comes with equities, because with return comes risk. And of course, your ability to take risk. If you don't have the time horizon, then don't take 100% equities portfolio, because you need time to ride up that volatility. Now, very quickly here, investing in different life stages. I mentioned that you can invest and you should invest even at the point of retirement. Otherwise, you will not be able to have enough resources in order to beat inflation. But there is a difference when you're accumulating and when you're retiring, when you start to draw down. And what are these differences? Firstly, when you talk about wealth accumulation, you focus on long-term capital appreciation. You generally can take higher risks than when you're retiring, and the sequence of returns doesn't matter. The sequence of returns means whether or not the market goes up first, then goes down in your time horizon, or it goes down first, then it goes up. It doesn't matter to you as long as you stay invested to the end of that time period. In retirement, your focus is not so much on capital appreciation. It is on receiving that regular income reliably. You will not choose the most aggressive portfolio when you're retired. And you need something to help to mitigate this sequence of returns risk. Let me go a little bit more into sequence of returns risk. Sequence of returns risk, let me illustrate with an example. Now, imagine the accumulator, 41 years old, you start $100,000. Because you're accumulator, you're not withdrawing from this fund. And there are two portfolios and two experiences, right? And at the end of this 25 years, the annualized return is the same. But portfolio A starts with negative, 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 then positive returns. The portfolio B starts with very positive returns, then it goes negative here and there. But if you analyze this, you do a calculation, it's basically 8% on average compounded. At the end of 25 years, portfolio A is 848, ending value. Portfolio B, same. No difference. It doesn't matter as long as you don't withdraw in between. Okay, so the sequence of returns does not matter for accumulator. But if you're retiring and you're withdrawing an amount, and let's say in this case, the example is 5% withdrawal of the starting value. So let's say we put these two, and then you're retiring already, 66 years old until the end of life, let's say 90 years old, and you withdraw from this account. You'll see that portfolio A, which starts with negative returns, runs out of money much more quickly than portfolio B. This is because if you think about it mathematically, you're withdrawing from a lower and lower base, that same amount, or even in this case, increasing amount because it's inflation adjusted. This is sequence of returns rates. You cannot eliminate it because you cannot tell in advance as a retiree whether the is going down or is going up. Right, and this is one of the issues that you in some countries had during the 2008 crisis. You're retiring during your annuity has to be converted during this time of let's say 2008 crisis. You face sequence of returns risk now, but you can mitigate it through financial planning, and this is where we have a high level of competence and conviction on this. How do you? There are several solutions that depends on you what are suitable. I'll go through very quickly. One is actually not an investment solution, it's actually an insurance solution, which is a retirement income insurance plan. I think most of you have heard of some of these things. You get a predetermined monthly payout, and part of it or all of it can be guaranteed. The monthly payout usually part of it is guaranteed, but your capital can be guaranteed to be returned to you after a certain time. Now, so you will know that, okay, if the insurance fund is well, then you put in 100,000 here, you commit for a number of years, maybe you get 7,000. If the insurance fund does well, at least you get your capital. If it's intermediate scenario, you get less. What's the cons? The cons is that this tends to be quite costly because there's a commissions and all that's involved in insurance sales. Of course, in money our case, we actually give people a 50% advisor commission rebate, so it really lowers your cost there. But generally speaking, this solution has these pros and cons. The second one is an income distributing fund that like us, we have tied up with Temasek subsidiary Fullerton. We created this fund that has a 4.5% payout, but this dividend is a dividend fund, is a percentage of the value, so it goes up and down. So let's say with portfolio B, in the years when it goes down, we may not pay the 4.5. The amount is different. So you put 100,000, it pays 4,005 a year, it aims to, but in some years, if it goes down a lot, that it will pay less than 4,005 because 4.5 of say 80,000 is less. But if it goes up a lot, it goes 150,000, then it pays 4.5% of 150,000. So this helps to some extent to mitigate that sequence of returns risk, to make it sustainable. The payout rate must be sustainable. Some rates are not sustainable in the market, and but this payout, the cons is that it will fluctuate because it goes along with that with the value of the fund. Now, the third option is to do a withdrawal or a withdrawal system, such that, for example, you restrict what you withdraw, and based on the rule of thumb, we know that a 4% withdrawal of a 60% equities, 40% portfolio can last you for at least 30 years. It's well documented there. So here it is tried and tested, and it can be one of the lowest cost options. But it's not easy to sort of implement this, and you sort of have to a lot of discipline to implement this because you have to take the action to withdraw, and that's some of the cons of this. So these are some things. Speak to financial advisor for what is the best solution for you depending on your circumstances and risk appetite. So I just want to conclude this section on investment. I'm quite near the end already. So investing itself, when we approach investing, the spirit of it and the mindset is important. We need to understand that investing is not an end in itself, and money itself, because money itself is not a goal, it's an enabler. Don't aim for money itself. Well, we invest not to beat some benchmark over, because we're not fund managers. We invest so that you have enough for the people who are dear to you and the goals that are important to you. And therefore, we focus on sufficiency and reliability in investments and in financial planning in general, not maximization, not even maximization for per unit risk. We talk about sufficient and reliable. And finally, so we talk about 4 steps: financial health, protection, understanding national schemes like CPF, investments. Finally, one last step. When we leave, your estate is created. You have an estate, and there are certain leakages that go out after you die. All these costs, and then the rest you give to your beneficiaries, and you need to distribute them in a certain way. So this is estate planning, which please don't neglect this estate planning. I want to ask you that if you think you don't need to write a will, whether this is your estate plan. That so this is I won't go through all of it, but for example, if you're married and no children, then actually your spouse gets 100%. If you're married with children and you don't leave anything, you don't leave a will, then the government will give, or the courts will award your spouse 50% and your children 50%. Now, if you have no children, then then it can goes to parents. Part of it. There's always there's this thing, only at the end then it goes to the government. Okay, it's a bit complex to explain, but the long and short of it is that you don't try not to leave it to the Intestate Succession Act for your wills. State your intentions, because it can take away a lot of issues in the family and lower costs as well. So just a very few pointers here on simple estate planning. Will distributes according to your wishes. It nominates guardians for minor children, simplifies and reduces the cost of probate. Now, you can do a simple will first. So a lot of times you get, oh, well, who is the guardian? But do a simple will. Now, if you don't do anything after today, I encourage you go on Money Hour website and write a simple will. Okay, it's a simple will until the time when you can think about it and want to go to a lawyer to write a more complex one. It's free, and it's something you can take for now. Will substitutes, they are, if you own property in joint tenancy with as opposed to tenancy in common, you have joint savings and account, investment account, these are not distributed by a will. CPF nominations are not distributed via will. Marriage revokes a CPF nomination. This you have to do with CPF board. Some will create trust, but this is usually for specific purposes. So I don't have time to go through that. But like I said, go and write a will. If you don't have one, just do it now. Okay, because you can just do it on Money Hour's website. Print it out, get it signed by two people who are not beneficiaries and not spouses or beneficiaries. There are instructions there. Sign it, and then don't lock it in your safe deposit box. Put it in some way where you know where your beneficiaries can get to that. Okay, this is something you can do for yourself. It's no cost. All right. So actually, I've come to the more or less the end of the content. I mean, some of you will always ask so how do you take action? You want to do this planning I talked about. So this is where you can do it with Money Hour. If you wish to, go to our website, and we have a service of financial planning, and this is the cost is $99. But then if you're an NTUC member, because the Singapore Labour Foundation grant is 75% off at only $24.75. So of course, if you're interested in investments and you like our investment philosophy, you can go for the investment only service. Or if your insurance needs and you want to get a 50% commission rebate and an unbiased view that gives you the lowest cost for what your projection needs, you can use our comparator website as well. Sorry, I forgot to mention that you need to key in this promo code. Again, take a picture of it if you're an NTUC member. I'm sure many of you are. And insert this. This is also on our website. And this is will then bring your payment all the way down to less than the cost of some durians. And so here is a last thought I want to leave with you, that there's a proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. So indeed, that's so financial planning, understanding what it's about is very useful, but it is even more important that you do not leave it there, but you do take action for yourself and for your family, so you can have that wellness of knowing that you have that sufficiency and reliability to live meaningfully now and into the future, no matter what happens. So thank you very much, and we can move on to Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Chun Ting. Thank you for the comprehensive presentation. We still have about maybe 20 minutes for Q&A. So you would like, you just state your name, and then we will let Albert handle all your questions. Thank you, Albert.
Okay, so I think Albert asked me to answer one question on the Q&A section. Would you recommend equal allocation of markets? Okay, I think to I think our participant here is very savvy to understand equal allocation. So what this means is that what is the concept of market capitalization. So like US got so many companies and they have certain shares out there, and each of the shares have certain prices. So big companies have very huge market allocation. So US tends to be about 40% in a global index. And then you have the maybe Japan had 10% and all that. So equal allocation, it means that you instead have a basket of countries and then you allocate to them equally. Now, I think that I'll say this, that depending on the time frame that people choose to do historical simulations, equal allocation sometimes can turn out better than the market allocation. However, there are certain things you need to bear in mind. Firstly, is the cost involved, because a fund that goes for indexed or references in index probably needs a little bit less work than by the fund manager than one that actively tries to go into equal. The second is that when it comes to equal allocation, you tend to allocate more to emerging markets as a result, or less developed capital markets. And there are often governance related issues or policy risk issues that cannot be discounted. So like for Money Hour, we have we use dimensional funds that show that small caps stocks tend to outperform in the long run based on Nobel Prize winning research. However, when it comes to emerging markets, we are more conservative because of the governance related issues for that. Thirdly, in terms of our investment philosophy, the reason why we say we keep simple and listen to markets is because markets aggregate the actions, beliefs, and expectations of millions of participants every day. And markets tend to be very efficient. And therefore, market cap is an expression to some extent of the market participants aggregate expectations. And so market prices tell us something. So instead of equal allocation, if you do not like pure index fund, then I'll recommend that maybe you read a bit more about our dimensional funds. Dimensional funds do not allocate a lot to the large cap stocks like the tech stocks, so that because we believe that in the long run, those that are stocks that are more value have shown to outperform the market in the long run. Again, this is not based on market timing, it's not based on stock picking, it is just based on understanding the underlying dimensions. So that's my response to this question in particular. Okay, I think maybe I have a few questions on chat. I think Mr. Leong Kyung mentioned US market. Do we buy the assets through Money Hour? Money Hour, we don't pick stocks. What we do is that we invest in the diversified funds. So let's say for equities, we have a fund that more or less tries, that has as a benchmark, I wouldn't say it tries, has as a benchmark the MSCI All Country World Index, of which 88% is developed markets, and of this 40% also is US market. So again, we also don't really think we need to pile it all into US market. So when you buy the fund, and this fund itself has a representation of the US market in terms of companies. So the companies that you know in different weightages according to the methodology, and yes, you can buy then that full fund. This fund has, I think, 7,500 stocks in itself. So each of our portfolios is about 8,000 securities. So that's there. Let's see. Do we have any other questions not answered?
I think there's a follow-up question, Chun Ting.
Okay. Okay. This is quite important question. US market. Yes, you are subject to the taxes. There are various types of taxes according to the laws there. In particular, I want to mention two. One is withholding taxes, and the dividend withholding tax, and the other one is the estate duty. So as if you are invested in US market and you pass away, actually your estate is subject to US estate duty. So this is something that sometimes some of the robo-advisors, for example, don't tell you. So please do be careful of that. The other part, withholding tax, is that there are certain tax treaties with certain jurisdictions, and if you don't, then the companies whose stocks you own, their dividends are subject to a tax. Now, it doesn't work in such a way that you get send the tax bill like IRS can send the tax bill. It's incorporated into the fund. The fund pays the tax. So at least for Money Hour side, what we do is we search out those in, let's say, Ireland, domicile funds, and there is beneficial in withholding tax treatment, and there's also no estate duty. Right? So of course, unless you are an Irish citizen, etc. These funds are called UCITS, UCITS, and that's we recommend that as well too, because these are some of the hidden costs that goes inside investments. Any promotion for investing or buying insurance with Money Hour? Yes. So we have. I mentioned a 50% commission rebate. We also actually have a very attractive promotion now for year end, that you get a pair of AirPod 3rd generation for insurance purchases. So that's worth like $279 or so. So do check it out. We have a promotions page. We already on top, that's on top of the 50% commission rebate that you get. We also have the various investment promotion for SRS. We didn't have time to go into SRS, but it's basically a tax deferral retirement planning scheme. I do check that out as well. I think we have enough resources online for that. Yes, I have a question here from Mr. Michael Ong. Avoided buying fund because it's expensive. Okay. In the market in Singapore, they have CPF has a research that it's all about 1.75% and 2%, because a lot of it, firstly, active managers they hire a lot of people, right? Then they're all like CFA qualified and all that, and then you pay them, right? And then do marketing, and then most importantly, you pay distributors. So it tends to be at 2%, like I say, it's very high. So for Money Hour, we work with Dimensional because the cost, the total expense ratios are like 0.3%. Because they don't do advertising, so it's a huge difference of 0.3%. There are there's at least one robo-advisor who will also rebate you part of the expenses of this. It's quite complicated, but then look at the net expense, is still very high, because it's 2%, you rebate half of it, is still like 1%. So look out for the total of that. So for us, it's 0.3%. Of course, we do charge an advisory fee for that, but again, it is lower than market, and in fact, I think we're one of the lowest, if not the lowest, for small investors. Okay. Let's go having a diversified portfolio of REITs. Just like I mentioned that in retirement income, one of the solutions is actually to get a dividend paying fund, right? That pays that. And in fact, our Wise Income solution has multi assets, and one of the things that generate regular natural yield is REITs. So REITs are sort of a kind of equities, but they also, like you mentioned, have fixed income characteristics. In particular, as REITs have quite good governance in Singapore, and a return has been decent. Now, so that's where our solution doesn't depend totally on REITs though, because we still feel that it's concentrated. What we do is we have 30% of REITs. We also have some Asian corporate bonds, mainly investment grade. Then we have some government bonds, and then we have another 30% of passive ETF in the global space to give you that kicker. So this is again is about reliability. It gives you a little bit when the income is generated out of a combination of natural yield as well as the capital appreciation. Because if you put it all into REITs, it's I think there's still a lot of concentration risk. Yeah, so that's I think REITs has a good role, but I think it's still good to be exposed to a bit more than that from both the return side as well as for the cushioning side. Retirement plan for, yeah, so I mentioned just now there are 3 types of solution broadly speaking, and one of them is actually insurance solution, which is a retirement income plan. This is where I think it's acceptable for, especially for those who are conservative, who do not need to have very high return, comfortable with return levels of about 3.8% or so, and they want to outsource the volatility to an insurance company and use the insurance company's balance sheet to do that. That's definitely so, and we do have attractive commission rebates as well for those. You can make inquiry with us, and that's you get no obligation quotations on that. Any final questions? Still have what? Lilian, do you have a question for me? Or Casey or Leonard?
I don't have any question, but I'm a very conservative investor. So I top up my CPF to $1 million. Every year I top up 37,740. And when last time I used to top up the SRS every year was 15,003. And then for stocks, normally I just purchase the 3 banks and REITs, because it's very unlikely to fail in these few years. I don't see the top 3 bank. Fortunately, MAS were fortunate in a way that they allow us to buy 100 shares, because to spend 30,000 on DBS Bank is a lot of money. But you do it every month. Let's say you just buy $3,000 of our shares on DBS. I think it should be okay affordable in a way. Yeah. So I don't know. What would you advise?
Okay. For as I explained, right, we tend to favor global investments, right? Because Singapore is a very small market, and but first I must commend you, Casey, on making use of CPF, innate compounding risk-free power, and I do recommend that for people who are who can lock away the money, because your congratulations on being a CPF millionaire, because once you know that you have that settled, right, you can actually take more risk. Now, when we talk about forming the core of your accumulation portfolio besides investment, I would still recommend that you put your core into a globally diversified low-cost fund, but you can put a portion then to things that you like, like in terms of, be it individual bank that you really believe in it, or you some people obviously invest in okay, I'm not recommending it. I'm not saying you should invest in crypto, but say that if you want to put a small percent, 5%, that, right? Go buy Toto also can, just don't depend on, I would say, don't have your retirement and things that are important to you, let it depend on something that is reliable. And for us, reliability has been shown in terms of market-based investments. Someone mentioned about S&P. S&P 500 US market has outperformed in the last probably about 10-15 years, and there are some dynamics behind that. But actually, US market before that, for some time of 2000 onwards, wow, it was actually the laggard, right? So I would say that the US market is quite good as an investment, but there are some things you don't we don't know that it will continue to be, or that it will stop being. So that's when we go with we tend to go and say, okay, US important, good, but maybe it's better to be even more diversified. Then you can capture a bit of emerging market, you can capture some of the rest as well. Yeah, so that's the general answer. What's our best performing fund? Okay, because our company is relatively new, and we also don't really focus on the short-term performance, because 1 year can go up, 1 year can go down. We do have certain, but for planning purposes, we do have expected return of but I wouldn't call it a best performing, because past performance is not indication of the future performance, and it should not be. If somebody sells you, say that, oh, I got 20%, 30% last year. Actually, I think we did that we actually did, and we outperformed all the digital investors on that. But I will not say that you'll get it every year. In fact, I can guarantee you're not going to get it every year, right? So the average we want to give you realistic returns for planning. Projected returns probably about 8 or so, but then you must minus the fund fees, and also we usually use a planning number of about 6.7 for that. Yeah. So again, like I said, you get market returns with compounding power. It is good. Again, I'm not saying it can be higher than 6.7, it can be lower than 6.7, but if you want to be conservative in your planning, that's what we offer. We are not very interested in promising you very high returns, or we don't cherry pick our. It's very easy to cherry pick a certain periods to show you, oh, very good. So if you do that, you find that US for 10 years very good, right? But what you want to do if you is a long-term return projection. And again, it's not a guarantee, but I think what you need to do in selecting an investment manager, be it Money Hour, whoever, is to believe in the philosophy, right? So because the most important thing is you can stick with this philosophy through ups and downs. I think that is very important. If not, then you're not going to have a good investing experience. Jia Xiang, do you recommend FA? No. Okay, this is one asset class that we do not recommend. Okay, and I know you could call it asset class, an instrument. I mentioned just now that we are advocates of term plans, but we don't generally think that we think most people don't need whole life plans because they're expensive. But of course, in some specific cases, we see the need. We already see the preference there. But LLPs is sorry, got nothing good to say about them, because ILPs is basically you make your investments in unit trust through the insurance company. The charges are just far too high. If you break down, there's this admin charge and the policy charge, then there's a big ask charge. But before you can make any money, you're down by like 4 or 5%. Right? That is just really not necessary, and the ongoing charges as well, layers of fees and trailer commissions and all that. So, and then you're locked into a certain group, right, of funds. So why don't you go outside and buy? You go outside and buy from a fund manager directly. Right? So I think that's our stance on ILPs. I mean, it's just really the costs are far too high, and every 1% that you pay in cost is 1% less for you. So you can imagine you pay 4 or 5%. I actually have an ILP from many years ago, but it's an offshore one because my husband's an expat. So buy this ILP. Well, you just keep paying, and not just the charges and all that, and you just end up losing so much money even after 20 years. Can you imagine after 20 years we are still in a loss position? So I put it to what you call paid up position. So it's very hard for me to have anything good to say about ILPs. I'm very sorry. Yeah. Albert is really very gentle in putting it. ILPs are not the most cost efficient. Yeah, they're very expensive. I think I should return the time now to let everyone go. Perhaps Leonard or Casey, would you like to close us? Thanks so much.
Sure, I think we take a photo first. Daniel, can you help to take photo? And guys, can you switch on your video so that we can take the group photo?